Hello again everyone, hope you're all doing alright. Let's carry on with the Creakers today then. We are on to chapter 27, going home. So, we were left with Lucy having turned her dad back from the Creaker King back into her dad again. So, let's see how they get on getting out of the Woleb, which sounds like it's about to collapse. Let's see. Mr. Larry Dunstan was back. While the Creakers watched in dismay, he grasped Lucy's hand and together they ran back to the tunnel where the bright circles of sunshine were pouring into the Woleb from Whiffington. Several worried faces were peering at them through the holes, including Norman's. "Lucy's back!" he yelled as she came into view. "And she's with... Wait, Lucy! Is that your dad?" "Yes, the Creakers snatched him," she yelled back. "Get ready, we're coming." Her dad grasped the nearest knotted rope in one hand and lifted up his Lucy Pops with the other. Then he tried to pull himself along the rope, but he was too weak. The transformation from Creaker King back to plain old bin man had sapped all his energy. "Norman, we're going to need some help," Lucy called out. Norman quickly pulled the rope through the hole towards him. Lucy watched as he looped, twisted, knotted and pulled it like some sort of Texas cowboy using every scout knot he knew. He threw it back to them a minute later. It was now a sturdy harness, big and strong enough for them both to slip over their shoulders. "Hold on tight!" shouted Norman. "Everybody, pull!" Lucy and her dad were suddenly hoisted off the ground. They were pulled away from the Woleb, moving through the glowing wormhole towards the glorious sunlight of Whiffington, as the crumbling rot of this hidden secret world decayed around them. Lucy hugged her father tighter than she'd ever hugged anyone before. She pressed her cheek into the awful stink of his work coat, revelling in the warmth that now filled it, no longer having to imagine he was there. As they moved along the melting wormhole, Lucy stole a glance at the backwards world below, and felt a heaviness pull on her heart. In the shadows, she saw Grunt, Guff, Scratch and Sniff, huddled together, shaking with fear as they watched their world, their home and their lives crumble around them. After all they've done, I'm starting to feel a bit sorry for those Creakers. How do you feel if your home was crumbling down around you? I definitely wouldn't be too pleased. Ooh, 10th page. The sunlight grew more intense and suddenly broke through the other side of Creakerland, burning a hole even deeper into the Woleb. The walls turned to dust and filled the air with a dull brown mist, and as it cleared, Lucy caught a glimpse of the vast Creaker city. It was the one she'd seen on the map at the centre of all of those spider-like legs. Miles below there were thousands of Creakers, crawling around, young ones, old ones, families, babies. All scurrying for cover, all desperate to avoid the burning sunlight blasting down into their world of waste and mess. Suddenly the memory of Sniff's wide eyes filled Lucy's mind, and she heard his scratchy voice asking for help. Her heart broke for him, and for all other Creaker kind below. "There you are," Norman said as Lucy came into view, and he pulled her back into the real world along with a bunch of scruffy-haired, wild-looking children who had helped heave them up. "Norman!" Lucy cried, throwing her arms around him and giving him a huge hug. "Thank you, and thank all of you too," she said to the wild kids. "Now off you go, find your parents," Norman said. And with that, the filthy children bolted for the door. "Oh, Norman, this is my dad," explained Lucy. "Dad, this is my friend Norman." Norman hopped to attention, gave the best scout salute he could manage. "At ease, Norman. Nice to meet you. Any friend of Lucy's is a friend of mine," Mr. Dunstan said, attempting his own scout salute. It wasn't technically correct, but Norman let it go this time. "Thanks," he whispered to Lucy. "For what?" "For telling your dad that we're friends." "I wasn't just saying it, Norman. I meant it." Lucy said, giving me a little nudge with her shoulder. Norman, where are we? She asked, suddenly realising she didn't recognise the room they were in. It was decorated in every shade of pink, and unless her eyes were playing tricks on her, it had fluffy wallpaper and the biggest four-poster bed she'd ever seen. Wait, let me guess, Lucy said. Ella's house? Norman smiled and they both giggled. Where is she? Downstairs with Mrs. Noying and the mayor, thanks to you. But how did you know how to find me? Lucy asked. I figured the Woleb must run underneath most of the town, so when you disappeared I just kept looking under beds, and there you were, Norman explained, pointing to the huge mattress and pillows leaning up against the wall, revealing the giant hole leading into the Woleb. Lucy's heart suddenly leapt like a frog. Quickly, put it back, she cried. What? Norman gasped as Lucy lunged past him and began remaking Ella's enormous pink bed, slamming the mattress down, covering the Woleb in shadow. They'll all die if we let the sunlight keep pouring in like this. We need to cover up all the holes. We have to tell everyone in Whiffington. Norman frowned. What are you talking about? Who will die? The Creakers, cried Lucy. I know you probably think I'm crazy, but we can't just let them be destroyed. With a final heave, she pushed the mattress over the last slice of sunlight. Norman's mouth gaped open like a goldfish, while Mr. Dunstan snapped his fingers. I know. There's one person who can get Whiffington folks to pay attention, then I think you're in luck. You're standing in his house. Lucy and Norman stared blankly at Mr. Dunstan. The Mayor of Whiffington, he said. Ella's dad, Norman and Lucy cried. The three of them ran out of Ella's pink fluffy room and downstairs as fast as they could. Mayor Noying, they called as they burst into the living room. I have no idea how it got marshmallows stuck on it. I promise I didn't wear it, Mama, Ella was saying with the perfect smile as she handed her mother a rather tattered-looking wedding dress. All that matters is that we're back together, Mrs. Noying replied, throwing the dress aside and pulling Ella in for a hug. Sorry to interrupt, Lucy said from the doorway, but we need help. Ella, where's your dad? I'm very sorry, but he had to leave, Mrs. Noying said calmly. I said that in Ella's voice, not Mrs. Noying's voice. I'm very sorry, but he had to leave, Mrs. Noying said calmly. Leave? But you've only just got back, blurted Norman. He said he had some work to attend to that couldn't wait, Mrs. Noying replied. Suddenly Lucy heard the rumble of helicopters, thundering into the skies outside, growing louder by the second. Not the normal sort of helicopter sound. This was the sound of huge, hefty helicopters, and lots of them. They all ran to the window and stared as a great shadow fell over the entire town. What the jiggins, said Mr. Dunstan as Lucy said the same. Well, you don't see that every day, muttered Mrs. Noying. A swarm of hundreds of grey military choppers filled the sky, flying closely together in formation, with the letters WAF stencilled on the side. Whiffington Air Force, cried Norman. The grown-ups were back, and they meant business. What's that thing they're carrying, Dad? Asked Lucy, pointing to the enormous circular machine dangling underneath some of the helicopters on long metal wires and swaying this way and that. That's a boring machine, Mr. Dunstan said. What do you think the boring machine is for? Here it is. What do you reckon they're going to do with it? Doesn't look very boring. I'd say it looked pretty interesting, replied Norman, gazing at the metallic Goliath whizzing over town. No, it's not a boring machine. It's a machine for boring holes, Mr. Dunstan explained. They're used to dig deep tunnels in the ground, like a big drill. The frog in Lucy's chest leapt again. She and Norman stared at one another. Why is a gigantic tunnel digging machine being flown into Whiffington by the WAF? Norman gulped. Lucy already knew the answer. They're going to dig a hole into the Woleb and destroy the Creakers, she cried. The image of thousands of helpless Creaker families cowering in the sun's rays flashed through her mind. She clenched her fists tightly. I need to stop that machine before it's too late. What? Why you? Said Norman. I was the one that found the Woleb, said Lucy. I was the one who worked out that sunlight can destroy it. That means that if the Creakers die, it will be my fault. I have to be the one to end this. She looked up at her father. I need to get to those helicopters, Dad. Mr. Dunstan looked back at his daughter, at the fierce determination in her eyes. She seemed to have grown up suddenly, and this time it wasn't anything to do with strange Woleb magic. Right you are, Lucy Pops. Wait just a jiffy, he said, zipping up his grubby green coat as he disappeared out of Ella's front door. Where's he gone? Norman squeaked, but after a few seconds his question was answered by the growl of an engine and the deep hoot of a horn. Norman and Lucy sprinted outside where Mr. Dunstan was pulling up in his stinky, spluttering rubbish truck. Quickly, get in, he said, leaning over and opening the passenger door. In that thing? Norman asked. Yeah. That okay? Asked Mr. Dunstan. Awesome, Norman cried, pushing past Lucy to jump in first. Lucy, Norman and Mr. Dunstan charged through the streets of Whiffington in the muckmobile. That's what Norman had decided to call it. Trying to follow the helicopters overhead. They lurched around corners so fast that half the rubbish in the back spilled out onto the streets, leaving a wake of whiff on every street they sped down. Sorry, Mr. Dunstan yelled out of his window. I'm used to picking up rubbish, not dropping it off. Where are they going? Lucy shouted as they whizzed along. Dunno, Lucy. Just don't take your eyes off them. There's a slight northwesterly wind, so taking that into account with their approximate heading, I'd say they're going... Norman paused. Where, Norman? Lucy cried. But that can't be right, he muttered. I can't see them anymore, Mr. Dunstan yelled as the helicopters whizzed below the line of the tall trees and disappeared behind the houses of Whiffington, carrying the whopping crate drilling machine out of sight. Dad, I've got an idea. Turn left, Lucy cried. But they didn't go left. Mr. Dunstan didn't get a chance to finish his sentence as Lucy leapt over and yanked the massive steering wheel towards her. The muckmobile skidded around a corner. There it is, the muckmobile. See the trail of rubbish they're leaving behind. They skidded around the corner, pulling into... Trampoline adventure! Lucy exclaimed as she jumped out of the truck into the nearest trampoline. We might be able to spot them. Norman and Mr. Dunstan followed, the pavement beneath their feet suddenly turning soft and bouncy. They all bounced along it, jumping as high as they could, trying to catch a glimpse of the helicopters and their machine. Can you see them? Lucy yelled with each bounce as their three heads bobbed up and down above the rooftops. When they suddenly came to the end of the street, they were completely exhausted. Sorry, Lucy. We lost them, Mr. Dunstan said. I think I... Norman panted, not able to get his words out. What is it, Norman? Lucy asked. He took a deep breath. Go up to the helicopters. Yes, I saw them. Where? They were hovering directly over your house, Norman gasped. You mean we've been chasing them all this time? And they've been flying towards our house? Cried Mr. Dunstan. Of course, it makes perfect sense, Lucy realised. Our house is where I discovered the Woleb, and where the sunlight first entered the shadowy tunnels. It's the perfect place to drill. It's where everything began. And it's where everything should end, said Norman. I just hope we're not too late, Mr. Dunstan said, as they bounced back into the muckmobile and raced towards their home. The closer they got, the more intense the noise became. Like driving into the heart of a thunderstorm. The rumble of helicopters' rotor blades set off car alarms, making glass windows rattle and tiles slip off rooftops, smashing on the ground below. As they pulled into Clutter Avenue, Lucy saw the most unbelievable thing she'd ever seen, even more unbelievable than the Woleb. Through the dusty windscreen of the Muckmobile, she could make out at least 100 WAF helicopters hovering over her little house, circling like a tornado of hungry vultures. Beneath them hung the whopping great drilling machine, swinging around like a metallic shark and baring its teeth at the rooftop of Dunstan House. The sight was enough to make Mr. Dunstan slam on the brakes, bringing the Muckmobile to an abrupt halt. "What on earth are you ever going to do to stop that, Lucy?" said Norman. "Lucy?" he repeated, looking around. But there was no reply. The passenger door was open and Lucy's seat was empty. "Where's Lucy gone?" Norman cried. Lucy wasn't wasting any time. She was sprinting as fast as she could towards the chaos, scrambling over car bonnets and stumbling through flower beds until she burst through her front gate and disappeared into the hallway. "Lucy, wait!" Mr. Dunstan cried, out of the window, honking the horn of his rubbish truck before leaping out and racing towards his house. Suddenly dozens of figures in dark uniforms flew down from the sky above and landed with a thud around him. Whiffington Air Force abseiling down from the choppers above. They formed a line across the street, forcing him to stop. "Sorry, sir, this is off limits now," the nearest officer said firmly. "But this is my house, and my daughter's in there," Mr. Dunstan said. Screech! Crash! Chomp! An ear-shredding sound sliced through the air as the teeth of the gigantic drill pierced the top of Lucy's house. The officers ducked for cover as the chimney was obliterated, sending bricks raining down onto the street and puncturing deep dents into Mr. Dunstan's truck. "Get back!" barked the WAF. "This street is now closed!" And with that, they clapped their hands on Mr. Dunstan's shoulders and marched him to the far end of the street, away from the house, away from the choppers, away from Lucy. She was on her own. All on her own. It must be so scary, having to be the one to save everybody, and all on your own too. We will see how she gets on with it tomorrow when we read chapter 28. The whopping great drilling machine. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for that. Alright, have a good day. Bye.